I'm Hannah. I'm a tutor at Sky Academy. And we're looking at the topic of statistical analysis, which comes under the Year 11 standard course. And we're looking at exploring and describing data, which is MSS1. So we're going to have a look at measures of spread in this video. So in the previous video, we looked at measures of central tendency, and now we're looking at measures of spread. And this video is going to be spread over two parts. So this video and the next video will both be talking about measures of spread. So firstly, we're going to have a look at the range. And the range tells us how spread apart our data is. So from the lowest score to the highest score, how far apart they are sitting. And so what is the range that our data lies in between? So if we have a higher range, that means our data is spread out. So the lowest point might be here and the highest one might be here. Or the lowest one could be here and the highest one could be here. So if we have a bigger range, we'll have more spread, and a lower range means it'll be closer or clustered together. So how we calculate the range is just the highest score minus the lowest score. So it's a very easy formula to remember. It's just the range of all of the data sets, so from the lowest to the highest. Now let's have a look at this example here. It says, for the test above, find the range. And so we know that the range is just the spread of all the data points from the lowest to the highest. And how we find that is just the highest score minus the lowest score. And so you just have to be aware that sometimes the data set won't be in order. And so the very end score might not be the highest and the very end score might not be the lowest. It can be, but it might not be. So when you're calculating the range, you do just have to skim your eyes over the rest of your data set to make sure there's not a lower score or a higher score in the middle of your data. So if we have a look, is there anything higher than 95? No, so 95 is our highest. And then is there anything lower than 40? No, so 40 is our lowest. And when we do 95 minus 40, we get 55. So that means that our data points are spread over a range of 55. So from the lowest to the highest, there is a possible 55 points of data that the data could be. And so in our example here, we were able to just go to the very bottom score and make that our lowest, and we were able to go to the very top score and make that our highest. But do please remember that the lowest might be sitting here. And if you don't skin your eyes over, you might miss it. So sometimes the questions are nice and are already in order from lowest to highest for you, but sometimes they aren't. And so you'll have to put them in order and make sure that your lowest is definitely your lowest and your highest is definitely your highest. Because if you make one mistake and think that 83 is your highest, it will change the range and all of your other data, measures of central tendency or measures of spread. So let's have a look now at quantiles. So quantiles is a way to spread out the data or see chunks of data. So if we have a look here, the first one is quartiles. And so obviously in the name, a quarter is 4 parts. And so a quartile is 4 equal parts. And to figure out how much each part is worth, you can just divide 100, which is a whole, by 4. And that will give us 25. And so the first the first quartile is going to be 25%. The second one is going to be 25 plus 25, which is 50. The third one is going to be 25 plus 25 plus 25, which is 75. And then finally, we'll have 25 plus 25 plus 25 plus 25, which is 100. We can do the same thing for deciles, and deciles are 10 equal parts. So if we do 100 divided by 10, we'll get the answer 10, which means the first decile will be a value of 10% of the data. And then the second decile will be 20%, third decile 30, and so on. And then the 100th decile will be 100% of the data. Then we have percentiles. And so if we divide 100 by 100, we'll get the answer of 1, which means the first percentile is going to be 1%, second, 2%, third, 3%, and so on, all the way up to 100 percentile, which is 100% of the data. And so this just means that if you're looking at the first percentile, 1% of the data will be in that percentile, and 99 will be in the rest of those percentiles. And if you're looking at the first quartile, that will have 25% of the data, and the rest of the data will be in the other quartiles. So that's just quantiles. They are just the spread of data into equal parts. And if we have a look at quartiles, which is very important within the measures of spread, we can see that Q2 is 50% of our data. So Q2 equals 50%. And if you remember, halfway of our data, or the middle of our data, is our median. And so Q2 is going to equal our median, because that's halfway. And if the whole of our data is represented by 100% of data, then half of it, or halfway, is going to be 50% of our data. So the Q2 equals 50% equals the median. And that's going to be very important to remember when we do the next measure of spread. So now we're going to have a look at the IQR, which is the interquartile range. And the interquartile range is calculated by doing Q3 minus Q1. And so it looks, when you look at the IQR formula by just first glance, it looks like you only have to find 2 bits of data. You have to find Q3 and Q1, and if you minus the 2, then you'll get the IQR. However, to find these 2, you first need to find Q2, which we remember as just the median, or halfway of our data. So once we find Q2, then we can find Q3 and Q1. So that's just something to keep in mind. So to find the IQR, we can do these 5 steps here. We firstly have to range the data from the lowest to the highest, increasing order. And then we divide the data into 2 equal-sized groups. So that's the median. So if we get our data and we find the halfway point, which is Q2, and divide the other 2 parts, that's what step 2 is talking about. So that's why you have to find Q2 first. Then you have 2 chunks of data, and you find the median of the first group to be Q1 and the median of the second group to be Q3. And then you can subtract Q1 from Q3 to find your IQR. So let's have a look at an example, and hopefully it will make more sense. So here we are being asked to find the IQR for the following data set. So I'm going to write down the formula for IQR first, which is Q3 minus Q1. But remember, you have to find Q2 first. So I'm going to write down the things that we need to find here. And then we can sub that information into the formula. So let's have a look at our data set. We have 4, 6, 7, 8, 10, 14, 15, 16, 18, 19, and 22. And by reading out those data points, and by looking at them, you can tell they're already in ascending order, going from lowest to highest. So we don't have to change the data set. Next, we have to find Q2, which is halfway. So I'm going to count up how many points we have and find the halfway point. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 data points. And so to figure out what our median is, we can do 11 plus 1 divided by 2. And that gives us 6. So our Q2 is going to be the 6th data point. So we can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this is the 6th data point, and it's going to be our Q2. So I can write 14 here. So now we have found our Q2. We can now find our Q1 and our Q3. And if you remember, the Q3 and Q1 are just the medians or the halfway point of each of the equal parts. So if we pretend this is one equal part and this is another equal part, we just have to find the median of those two. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so if we do 5 plus 1 divided by 2, that will give us our median. And so that's going to be the 3rd data point. So 1, 2, 3. So this here is going to be our Q1. And now we can do the same for the last section, the second half. And we have the same amount of numbers in this one. So it's going to be our 3rd data point. So there's 1, 2, 3. So 18 is going to be our Q3. So just to recap what we've done so far, we've found the median of the complete data set from the lowest to the highest, and we found that as our Q2, which was 14. Then when we had our data split into 2 equal parts, the yellow part and the pink part, we found the median of each of those halves. So we found the median of the yellow part, which was Q1, and then the median of the pink part, which was Q3. So now we found those, we can sub into our IQR formula. And so we're going to get Q3, which is 18 minus 7. And so therefore our IQR is going to be 11. And so that's how you find the interquartile range of a data set.